Okay, well then, let's get started, shall we? We are gonna start with Lux and Garen's story, which would lead us into the Demacian Civil War story, which would lead us into Demacia lore overall. Maybe that should be first, to be honest, before the Civil War, but we'll see. It is what it is. Like, I'm just going based on the dates of the release. Then we're gonna go into I'm assuming when Jarvan IV took the throne. And then Silas going to the Frey Lords. And then the novel for Garen First Shield. And then that would be it for the Ionia stuff for today. For the Demacia stuff for today. We'll see how that goes. But anyways, without further ado, for Demacia! Lux and Garen's story by Necrit. Let's go.
Hello everyone!
Hello.
We've got one last Demacian story ahead of us. Because this is a big piece of lore that continues the story, I highly recommend reading the stories of Galio, Lux and Garen first. So let's have a look at the story called For Demacia.
It's really hard to fucking peel this shit.
How long had it been since Lux had come north to Phosboro? She wasn't quite sure, but guessed it was around
7 years ago.
7 years.
Huh?
Garen had just left to begin his training with the Dauntless Vanguard, and the rest of the family had come north to honor the tomb of great-grandfather Phocion. Lux remembered complaining about the never-ending rain as they made their way along winding paths through the forest to her ancestor's tomb. She'd been expecting a marble mausoleum like the Hall of Valor, but was disappointed to learn it was just a little more than a patch of grass on top of a cliff. A marble slab set into the base of the patch depicted the legend of her ancestor, Phocion and the demon falling from the cliff, her great-grandfather mortally wounded, the nightmarish entity with a Demacian blade piercing its black heart. It had rained then, and it was raining now. An icy northern flood fresh off the mountains that separated Demacia from the Freljord. A storm was brewing in the frozen realm, breaking on the far side of the peaks. To the west and east, the mountains disappeared into azurite haze. The sky dark.
Also, wait. Is this the horse from World of Warcraft? Is this young Jaina?
Like one of her brother's saltier moods. The northern highlands were craggy with cliffs and plunging chasms. Dangerous lands. Home to fell creatures and wild beasts of all descriptions. Lux had set off into the north 2 weeks ago. Demacia to Edessa, then to Pinara and onto Lysus. Lysus to Velorus, and finally to High Silvermane,
Jesus Christ.
the city of raptors. A night with her family at their home at the foot of Knight's Rock, then out into Demacia's northwest.
That's already 5 zones, I'm assuming, that can be in the MMO. Ah, damn. Yeah, like, the MMO release is gonna have so many, like, zones. It has to. Like, any MMO release, like a 1.0, has to have so many zones. It's every expansion that adds, like, 6 or 5 or whatever, because the development is so much smaller. You only have, like, 2-3 years, maybe, per expansion. But like when you release an MMO, like a brand new one, you have years, so you're gonna have to make a lot of zones. And luckily, Riot seems to have a lot of zones.
Marches. Almost immediately, the character of the people and villages began to change as the heartland of Demacia fell behind her. Rolling versatile plains gave way to windswept hinterlands. Silverwing raptors screeched overhead, invisible as they dueled in the clouds. The air grew colder, carrying from the deep ice of the Freljord, and the walls of each settlement grew higher with every mile she rode. It had been a long and tiring journey to Phosboro, but she was here, and Lux allowed herself a little smile. "We'll be at the temple soon, Starfire," she said,
Starfire?
down to rub her horse's mane.
Yeah.
"They'll have grain
Starfire.
on the table for you, I promise." The horse shook its head and snorted, stamping its feet with impatience. Lux kicked back her heels and walked her tired mount along the tracks leading to Phosboro's main gate.
So I'm assuming he's not he's reading the story. He's not like telling the story, right? Because if he was telling, he'd probably like skip all these minor details. They're like irrelevant, like just kind of like emotion building or whatever, like they do in stories. But like as far as like information, this is like kind of like who cares.
Gate. The town occupied the banks of Serpentrian, a thundering river that rose in the mountains and snaked to the western coast.
This is Necrit's attempt at audiobook reading.
Welcome light in the gathering dusk. Lux pulled back the hood of her blue cloak and shook her hair free. Long and golden, it framed a youthful face of high cheekbones and ocean blue eyes that sparkled with determination. She untied the leather
Have fun with the installation.
staff to the saddle and held its gold and ebony haft loosely at her side.
2
men appeared on the tower above the iron-bound gate, each armed with a powerful longbow of ash and yew. "Halt, traveler," said one of the guards. "The gates closed until morning." "My name is Luxana Crownguard," she said. "As you say, it is late, but I've come a long way to pay my respect to my great-grandfather. I'd be in your debt if you'd allowed me entry." The man squinted through the gloom, his eyes widening as he recognized her. It has been years since she'd come to Fosborough, but garen always...
Good. I hope you see a difference.
When people laid eyes on Lux, they never forgot her. "Lady Crownguard, forgive me," he cried, turning to address the man below. "Open the gates!" Lux eased Starfire forward as the solid timbers of the gate lifted into the stone of the barbican with a clatter of heavy iron chains. As soon as it has risen enough, Lux rode under it to find a hastily assembled honor guard awaiting her. 10 men in leather breastplates and blue cloaks secured with silver pins in the shape of winged swords. They were proud Demacian soldiers, though their shoulders were curiously slumped and their eyes haunted with exhaustion. "Welcome to Fosborough," said the man who had spoken to her from the tower. "This is a great honor, my lady. Magistrate Giselle will be relieved to know you are here. May I offer you a detachment of soldiers to escort you to her home?" "Thank you, but that won't be necessary," said Lux, wondering at the man's choice of the word relieved. "I've arranged accommodation with Mistress Pernile at the Lightbringer Temple." She made to ride on, but sensed the guard's desire to say something, and gently pulled Starfire's reins. "Lady Crownguard," said the guard, "are you here to end our nightmare?" The Lightbringer Temple was warm and dry, and with Starfire settled in the stables, she had spoken at length with Mistress Pernile in the main hall. Rumors of dark magic in the forests and crags around Fosborough had reached the Lightbringers in the capital city of Demacia, and Radiant Kaina had sent Lux to investigate. Lux had sensed the dark undercurrent as soon as she had entered the town. Okay,
I'm gonna move this a bit faster, the playback speed, mostly because these are like... From all of this 6-minute video, all I gathered is, all like you really care about is... Okay, Lux is going to her grandfather's place. There's like 4 cities that she went through, or 5. And there's some nightmare that she has to, like, shit that people are asking her to deal with. Boom, done. Like 10 seconds. Good luck.
A creeping sensation of being watched from the shadows. The few townfolk she had seen in the streets walked with leaden steps, their bodies wary. Fear hung over Fosborough, but it was worse than Lux imagined. It's Magistrate Giselle's son, Lusa, explained Mistress Pernile,
Luca,
a flaxen-haired woman in the pale robes of a Lightbringer healer. "What about him?" asked Lux. "He went missing 2 days ago," explained Pernile. "And people are certain he's been taken by a dark mage for some terrible purpose."
Okay.
"Why do they think that?" "Ask me again in the morning," said Pernile.
Okay.
Lux awoke with a scream, her heart hammering in her chest and her breath coming in wheezing spikes. Terror filled her mind. A nightmare of clawed hooks dragging her beneath the earth, of mud filling her mouth and darkness smothering her light forever. Lux blinked away the last after-images, glimpsing retreating shadows out of the corner of her eye. Her mouth was filled with the taste of rancid milk, a sure sign of lingering magic, and she let spectral radiance build in her palms. Light filled the room, and with it the last remnants of the nightmare was banished. Warmth suffused her, her skin shimmering with a haze of familiar iridescence. She heard voices downstairs and clenched her fists. The light faded, leaving only the traces of daylight from the shattered windows to illuminate the room. Lux pressed her hands to the side of her head, as if seeking to push the awful visions from her mind. She tried to recall specific moments from the nightmare, but all that came was the reek of sour breath and faceless darkness pressing down upon her. Her mouth dry, Lux quickly dressed and lifted her staff from the corner of the room. She descended to the temple kitchen, and though she had little in the way of appetite, prepared a breakfast of bread and cheese. At the first bite, the taste of grave earth filled her mouth, and she put the food aside. Now do you see? Asked Pernille, entering the kitchen and joining her at the table. The skin below Pernille's eyes were purple with lack of sleep, her skin sallow without firelight to color it. Only now did Lux notice how bone-weary Pernille was. What did you dream? Asked Lux. Nothing I want to relive by saying it out loud. Lux nodded slowly. There's something very wrong with this town.
Yeah.
Starfire whinnied at the sight of her, his ears pressed flat against his skull and his eyes wide. He nuzzled her, and she stroked his pearl-white neck and shoulders. You too? She said, and the horse tossed its mane. Lux quickly settled her mount and rode forward.
The horse of the nightmare.
Dawn was already an hour old.
Maybe he was being chased by a carrot.
But the town was still to fully come to life. No smoke rose from the forges, no smell of fresh bread wafted from the bakeries, and only very few sullen-looking merchants had their doors open for business. The Massians were hard-working, disciplined, and industrious, so to see a frontier town so late to begin the day's work was highly unusual. But if Phosborough's people had to endure the night like hers, she couldn't blame them for being slow to rise. She pressed through the gate into the open ground before the town and let Starfire run to work out the stiffness in his muscles before turning to the muddy road. The stallion had broken his leg many years ago, but it hadn't impaired the speed of his gallop. Easy boy, said Lux as they rode into the forest. The scent of pine and wildflowers hung heavy in the air, and Lux savored the heady natural aroma of the northern climes. She rode into the forest, following the tracks as it wound its way further north. Lux lifted a hand from the reins and reached for a glittering sunbeam, feeling the magic within her stir at its touch. She let it come, feeling the light at the center of her being spread through her body like an elixir. Her world lit up.
Oh my god. It's like so many like stuff I don't care about. It's like the magic lifted her senses. Like this tastes like fucking dirt or whatever. It's like she took a bite, she couldn't take any more bites. Get to the point!
The colors of the forest unnaturally vivid and filled with life. She saw glittering motes of light drifting in the air, the breath of trees, and the size of the earth. How incredible was it to see the world like this, alive to the energies flowing through every living thing, from blades of grass.
Because this is definitely him reading the script, reading the text of like the book or the comic or whatever. It's like he's just reading it pretty much word for word, right? And obviously, like, I'm not complaining that's like he's reading word for word. It's like, oh, he's reacting to a script. Oh, well, you're reacting to his video. That's not it. It's more like this is all pretty much useless information aside from what I already mentioned and that she had a nightmare. Even the nightmares, like, who cares? It's like literally she went to her grandpa's place. She fought, I don't know, Nocturne. Cool. That's all I want to know, man. All this information is so extra.
The routes were set to reach the very heart of the world. After an hour of riding through the iridescent forest, the road ended at a crossroad. One path leading east, to a lodging town if she remembered correctly. The other dropping west, to a community built around a thriving silver mine. Her father owned a stake in the mine, and her favorite cloak pin had been wrought from metal dug from there. Between the two main routes lay a smaller pathway, all but invincible and suitable only for lone riders, or those on foot. 7 years ago she had taken that path, and Lux wondered why she was reluctant to guide Starfire in that direction. She had no need to go that way, for her story of paying respect to her great-grandfather was just that, a story. Lux closed her eyes and lifted her arms out to the side, letting the magic drift from her fingertips to the glittering tip of her staff. She took a breath, filling her lungs with cold air and letting the light of the forest speak to her. It spoke in contrasting hues of light and...
You would think that's like even Demacia, I don't know if it's at these times, but from what I understand, Demacia at this time already doesn't allow mages, right? It's like mages are like, you know, bad, whatever, right? You would think a person walking around with a staff is a mage. I mean, like, why else are they walking around with a staff, right?
She felt the light of distant stars drifting down like a mist, light that bathed other worlds and people. Where the light of Demacia fell into shadow, she flinched. Where it nourished something living, she was soothed. Lux turned in the saddle, her senses extended far beyond those of most other mortals, seeking the power that lay over the land like a curse. The sun was almost at its zenith, and she felt the quality of the light in the forest trembled. She felt shadows where no shadows should dwell, hidden darkness where only light should exist. The breath caught in her throat, like a hand at her neck. A sudden wave of dizziness swept over her. Her eyelids fluttered, drifting close as if she were being pulled into a waking slumber. The forest around her was suddenly silent. Not a breath of wind stirred in the leaves of the trees, nor ruffled so much as a blade of grass. The silver wings were silent, the chattered animal stilled. Lux heard soft noise of grave cloth being pulled tight. Sleep. No, she said, gripping her staff, but the unnatural weariness slipped over her like a comfortable blanket, warm and enfolding. Lux's head dropped and she closed her eyes for the briefest instant. The snapping sound of breaking branch and the scrape...
Bro, that is such a good feeling when you're just so tired and you're just like, just closing your eyes for like a second. You're like, It's just such a good feeling. Kind of feeling it right now. Listening to this information.
She drew in a great draught of air, the cold in her lungs jolting her awake again. She blinked shadows from her eyes and let out an icy breath as she drew her magic back into herself. She heard men on horseback, the jingle of bridle and trace, the rasp of metal on metal, riders armored for war, at least 4, perhaps more. Lux wasn't scared, not yet, and certainly not of men. Whatever darkness was lurking somewhere in the forest was a more immediate threat. Its strength was uncertain.
I knew it.
The limits of what they could do.
Fucking knew it was Nocturne this whole time, man. Okay.
She pulled Starfire's reins, turning him around and setting him sides to the pass, ready to face whatever was coming. Freljordian riders?
Oh yeah, wait, isn't she the one who basically helped imprison Nocturne? I'm assuming she snared him.
She was too far inland for reavers from the sea, and she would have heard if one of the great mountain forts had fallen. Outlaws, perhaps? That Lux could deal with. She let the magic simmer just beneath her fingertips, ready to unleash its power in destructive bolts of light. The foliage in front of her parted, and 5 horsemen rode into view. Powerful men, armored head to foot, warplate. They rode wide-chested steeds of grey, none smaller than 17 hands, and each caparisoned in cobalt blue.
17 heads.
Where the 5th had his golden-hilted blade sheathed in a blue scabbard across his back. Luxana, said this rider, his voice muffled by the visor of his helm. Lux sighed as the knight removed his helmet to reveal dark hair and granite-hewn features that so embodied Demacia it was wonder they weren't on a coin yet. Garen, sighed Lux.
Wait, I thought Garen was blonde. Oh, no, he has brown hair, yeah.
From any other army, 4 warriors would be paltry force. But every warrior...
I don't know why I thought he was blonde.
A legend with tales of valor etched into the metal of their swords. Their deeds were told and retold around tavern tables.
Bro, the shoulder, like, pauldrons, whatever, definitely not very comfortable. It's like falling onto his forearm. Imagine you're trying to raise your sword, but you can't because the fucking shoulder pads are, well, pauldron, are blocking your forearm armor. Like your gauntlets just like keeps hitting your fucking pauldron, so you can't raise your arm, and you just want to do a slash, but you can't. Oh god.
Dark of hair and keen of eye was Daedoro, the bearded swordsman who had held the gates of mourning against the armored host
Daedoro.
for an entire day. Flanking him was Sebeter of Jendale, the slayer of the hideous deep worm who awoke every 100 years for a feast, but would wake no more. Its fangs were hung in King Jarvan's throne room, next to the newly mounted dragon skull brought in by his son and his enigmatic companion. Slighter, though no less striking, was Varia, she who led the charge onto the decks of the Sea Wolf fleet at
Varia.
She set their ships ablaze.
I'm assuming we don't know these heroes because they're probably gonna die soon.
And even cut down their berserk leader. Rodian,
It would just
had sailed north to Frosthelm.
Yeah, it would just show how important Lux and Garen to the story, because the story is gonna protect them with what do you call it, with plot armor. But these guys who are like no names but apparently are heroes are definitely gonna die. I'm just feeling it.
Burned the Freljordian harbor city to the ground, so that no others would dare.
So is this the group that captures Nocturne?
But rolled her eyes at the thought of hearing their legends around the table tonight. Yes, they were heroes of Demacia and entirely worthy of respect, but hearing about Sebeter climbing down the deep worm's gullet for the 10th time, or how Varia beat Glaremorn to the death with a splintered oar was too much for Lux. Garen came alongside her as they followed the road back to Fosborough. They had circled the town until the light began to fade in search of the missing sun, though any servants of darkness would have had plenty of time to run and hide, given the noise Garen and the dauntless vanguard were making. 5 warriors in heavy warplate weren't exactly stealthy, and without the magic to aid her, Lux hadn't been able to sense the source of the dark magic she had felt at the crossroad. You're really here to visit the great-grandfather Fossian's tomb? I said so, didn't I? Yes, replied Garen. You did,
sure.
I'm surprised. I seem to recall Mother saying you hated coming here last time. I'm surprised she remembered. Oh, she remembered.
Wow. Alright. We can tell what the relationship is there in that family.
The skies darken, rain clouds empty, and forest animals hide. You make me sound like a spoiled bard.
Yep.
Said Garen, his easy grin only partially robbing the comment of its sting. You got away with things I'd have a scalp bag for doing. Mother was always telling me not to pay attention to the things you did. The words hung over them, and Lux looked away, remembering not to underestimate her brother. People knew him as honest and direct, with a sound of grasp of tactics, but few ever thought of him as subtle or cunning. That Lux knew was a mistake. Yes, Garen was a simple warrior, but simple didn't mean stupid. So what do you think happened to the boy? Asked Lux. Garen ran a hand through his hair. If I had to guess, I'd say he ran away from home, he said. Or decided to have an adventure and gotten lost somewhere in the forest. You don't think a dark mage has taken him? It's certainly possible, but Varia and Rodian rode through this way only 6 months ago, and saw no evidence of unnatural magics. Lux nodded and asked, have you spent the night in Fosborough? No, answered Garen as they rode into sight of the town. Why do you ask? Just curious. There's something going on down there, said Sabator, his hand shielding his eyes from the setting sun. Garen's eye snapped to where his warrior was pointing, and all levity fell from his face. His entire posture changed, muscles taut and ready for action, his eyes utterly focused. The warriors of the Dauntless Vanguard formed up alongside him, ready to move in an instant. "What is it?" said Lux. An angry-looking crowd was hounding a stumbling man through the streets toward the market square. She couldn't hear what they were shouting, but she didn't need to hear the words to feel their anger and fear. "Vanguard, we ride," said Garen, raking his spurs back.
We ride
Starfire was a fast
to the moon!
match for grain-fed Demacian war steed. By the time Lux rode through the gates, the sound of yelling voices echoed through the town. Starfire's flanks were covered with sweat, and his iron-shod hooves struck sparks from the cobbles. Lux leapt from the back of her horse as she saw a scene she had witnessed too many times throughout Demacia. No, she muttered, seeing two guards drag a weeping man onto the auction platform normally used during the buying and selling of livestock. The man's clothes were soaked in blood, and he wailed piteously. A woman with fur-trimmed robes and bronze wings of a Demacian magistrate stood before him, presumably Magistrate Giselle. Hundreds of Phosborough's townfolk filled the square, yelling and screaming at the man. Their hate was intense, and Lux felt her magic drawn to the surface of her skin. She quelled the rising light and pushed her way through the crowd, seeing Garen at the foot of the steps leading onto the auction platform. "Although Diane," said Magistrate Giselle, her voice ragged with emotion, "I name 3 murder and consort of a dark mage." "No," cried the man. "You don't understand. They were monsters. I saw them. Their real faces. Darkness. Only darkness." "Confession," cried Giselle. The crowd screamed in response. A swelling lust for vengeance.
So it's like, imagine, like, you're just like, you're explaining what you see. Aha! So you were there. You're also an accomplice. Like, I'm a witness, not an accomplice.
Erupting from every throat. They looked set to rush the auction platform to tear Aldo Diane limb from limb. And perhaps they would have, but for the 4 warriors of the Dauntless Vanguard standing with their swords drawn at its edge. "What's going on? What happened?" asked Lux as she reached Garen's side. Garen didn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the kneeling man. He murdered his wife and children in their beds, then ran out onto the streets and attacked his neighbors. He split 3 people with an axe before they were able to restrain him. Why would he do that? Finally, Garen turns to look at her. "Why do you think? There must be a mage nearby. A darkness holds sway here. Only the dark influence of a sorcerer could drive loyal Demacian citizens to commit such heinous acts." Lux bit back an angry retort and
Loyal Demacian
climbed
citizen.
the steps of the platform and marched over to the kneeling man. "Luxana Crown Guard, what are you doing?" demanded Giselle. Lux ignored her and lifted the man's head. His face was bruised, one eye swollen shut from the heavy blows. Blood and snot ran freely from his nose, and ropes of drool hung from his split lip. "Look at me," she said, and the man's good eye tried to focus on her. The white of his eye was bloodshot and purple-edged, the eye of a man who had not slept in days. "Good man Diane, tell me why you killed your family," said Lux. "Why did you attack your neighbors?" "Not them. No. I saw... weren't them. They was... monsters," sobbed the man. "Darkness clothed in skin, among us the whole time. I woke and saw their true faces, so I killed them. I had to do it. I had to." She looked up as Magistrate Giselle appeared at Lux's shoulder. Lux saw soul-aching grief etched into the woman's face. The last 2 days had aged her 10 years. The magistrate stared down in disgust at Aldo Diane, her fists clenched at her sides. "Did you kill my Lusa?" she said, her voice wrecked with sorrow. "Did you kill my son, just because he was different?" Baying cries for vengeance rose from the crowd as the sun sank into the west. Handfuls of mud and dung pelted Aldo Diane as his former friends and neighbors called for his death. He thrashed in the grip of the guards. "I had to kill them," he screamed, staring defiantly at his accusers. "It weren't them, just darkness, only darkness. It could be one of you too." Lux turned back to Magistrate Giselle. "What did you mean when you said your son was different?" Giselle's grief was all-consuming, but Lux saw past it to the secret shame beneath. The magistrate's eyes were bloodshot and ringed with dark smudges of exhaustion, yet even that couldn't hide the same look she had seen in her mother's eyes whenever Lux's power had gotten the better of her. It was the same look she had sometimes saw in her brother's eyes when he thought she wasn't looking. "What did you mean?" she asked again. "Nothing," said Giselle. "I didn't mean anything. Different how?" "Just different." Lux had heard deflections before, and suddenly knew.
Was he floating? Did he have, instead of 2 hands, he had like 2 blades? Could he charge at people from miles away? Like, how was he different?
Exactly how the magistrate's son was different. "I've heard enough," said Garen as he strode onto the platform, his long sun-steel sword hissing in its scabbard. The blade glinted in the twilight, its edge unimaginably sharp. "Garen, no," said Lux. "There's something more going on here. Let me speak with him." "He is a monster," said Garen, spinning his sword up onto his shoulder. "Even if he is not a servant of evil, he is a murderer. There can be only one punishment. Magistrate." Giselle looked away from Lux, her eyes wet with tears. She nodded. "Aldo Diane, I declare you guilty and call upon Garen Crownguard of the Dauntless Vanguard to dispense Demacian justice." The man lifted his head, and Lux's eyes narrowed as she felt a prickling sensation of something pass through him. A whisper of lurking presence. It slithered away before she could be sure, but a breath of frayed air raised her hackles. Diane's limbs twitched as if afflicted by a turmoil sickness. He whispered.
It would be cool if Nocturne's fear would actually make people attack in panic, but also would kind of be counterproductive. If you like fear a Tryndamere, he just like keeps auto attacking you. It's like, yeah, maybe this is not the best thing.
As Garen lifted his warblade to deliver the executioner strike, Dian's last words were all but lost in the roars of approval coming from the crowd. But Lux finally pieced them together as Garen's sword swept down.
The light is fading.
Wait!
Yeah.
Blow the man's head from his body in one titanic blow to the roar of approval from the crowd. The body dropped to the platform, twin arcs of blood jetting from the stump of his neck. The head rolled to Giselle's feet as boiling smoke poured from Aldo Dian's corpse. The magistrate recoiled in shock as a phantom form of wicked claws and searing eyes erupted from the dead man's skull. The spectral darkness launched itself at the magistrate with a crackling of spite. She screamed as it passed through her before disappearing like wind-scattered cinders. Lux felt the breath of the thing's demise. An energy so vile, so hateful and so inhumanly evil that it beggared belief. Magistrate Giselle collapsed, her flesh ashen, weeping in terror. Lux dropped to one knee as myriad visions of horror arose within her, choking fears of being buried alive, of being driven from Demacia by her brother, of 1,000 ways to die a slow and painful death. The light within her fought these terrible sights, and Lux's breath shimmered with motes of light as she spat the taste of death from her mouth. Lux. Garen spoke in whisper, and it took her a moment to figure how she could possibly hear him over the cheering crowd. Lux turned from the sobbing magistrate and felt magic race around her body in a surge tide. The crowd stood utterly silent. Lux, what's going on? Said Garen. Lux blinked away the abhorrent images still searing in her mind and followed Garen's gaze as the warriors of the Dauntless Vanguard rushed to stand to their side. Then, one after another, the people of Phosboro fell to the ground, as if the life had simply fled their bodies. Lux clenched her teeth and pushed her way to her feet. The sun had all but vanished behind Phosboro's western wall, and her mouth fell open as she saw black vaporous shapes lift from the town's unconscious inhabitants. No two were alike, and Lux saw an assembling host of demons in Noxian armor, vast spiders, many-headed serpents, towering demon warriors with frost axes, great drakes with teeth like obsidian daggers, and scores of things that defied sane description. Sorcery, declared Garen. The shadow creatures closed on the platform, sliding through the air without a sound.
Magic. Motherfucker.
Basically what it was.
An oncoming tide of nightmarish horrors. What are they? Asked Varia. The darkest nightmares of Phosboro's people given form, said Lux.
Oh, good.
How can you know that? Demanded Sabator. I just do, said Lux, knowing she couldn't stay here to fight. Her skills would be best employed somewhere else, and the Dauntless Vanguard could hold their own here. She placed her thumb and forefinger against her bottom lip and whistled a summoning note before turning to Garen. I know how to stop this, she said. How? Said Garen without taking his eye off the approaching demon host. Never mind how, said Lux. Just try not to die before I get back. Lux ran to the edge of the platform and Starfire galloped through the creatures. Her steed passed unmolested, its dreams and nightmares of no interest to the power now abroad in Phosboro. Lux leapt from the platform and grabbed Starfire, swinging onto his back in one smooth motion. Where are you going? Demanded Garen. The horse reared and Lux twisted in the saddle to answer her brother. I told you, she shouted. I am going to pay respect to my great-grandfather Phocion. Garen watched his sister gallop through the dark.
But is Nocturne? No, there's no way. Maybe great-grandfather Phocion is the one who fought Nocturne back then?
Host, carefully navigating a path through the town's fallen inhabitants. Grasping claws of demon creatures reached for her, but she and Starfire evaded every attack. Lux rode clear of the monstrous host and paused just long enough to lift her golden staff to him. For Demacia! She shouted. The Dauntless Vanguard clashed their swords against their shields. For Demacia!
Oh.
They answered as one. Lux turned her horse and galloped from the town. Garen rolled his shoulders in anticipation and lifted his sword. Lockstep! He yelled, and his warriors took up their battle stance. Varia and Rodian stood to his left, Sabator and Daedro to his right. We are the Dauntless Vanguard, said Garen, lowering his sword so its quillins framed his piercing eyes. Let courage and keen eye guide our blades. Oil-black demon hounds were the first to reach the platform, leaping upward with daring fangs and flashing teeth. Garen and the Dauntless Vanguard met them with shields locked and blades bared. A hammering wall...
It looks like Garen's passive is activated, because you can see like white lines sometimes like flowing around him.
...of iron beat them back.
There, see it?
Were brought from shadow and spite. They fought with ferocious strength and skill. Garen stepped in and thrust his blade into the writhing beast's hinges, tearing through to where its spine should be. The monster's form exploded into black dust with a shriek of anguish. Garen spun his sword up and pulled it back in a turn. His sword deflected another beast's snapping jaw. He rolled his wrist and lowered his shoulder into its attack. He pushed the thing back and down. He stamped its chest and the beast roared as it burst apart. Garen's sword snapped back to block a crushing blow from what looked like a silhouette of a towering Freljordian warrior. The impact drove him to his knees. I will fight as long as I stand, he said through gritted teeth, straightening his legs with a roar and hammering his pommel into the savage warrior's horned skull. Ashes burst from the demon, and Garen spun to drive his sword into the belly of another beast. Sebeter decapitated a slavering hound as Daedro slammed his shield down on a hissing serpent, severing its body in half. Varya hammered the hilt of her sword into the snapping fangs of a faceless demon warrior as Rodian drove his sword into his twin's foe. With every...
What I don't get from all of this is they were in, like a second ago, they were in the middle of the town. It's not like they left. So all the people there either turned to demons, because they were already demons, or... well, like the whole, like, their lives, like, left them or whatever. So either all the people turned to demons, or these guys are under the same illusion that the guy who they killed, who Garen beheaded, they're under the same illusion. Now they're just killing innocent people. But also these innocent people are attacking them because they think they're also evil. So it's like everyone's just like seeing something that's not there.
Every killing blow, the shadow creatures burst into ember-lined ashes. Garen's sword flashed and the silver blade plunged into the body of a scorpion-like monster. A slashing of dark talons came at Garen's head. Sebeter's shield parried the attack. Varya chopped her blade through the monster's legs and it burst apart. A hideous, limping creature hurled itself at Rodian, and he thrust his blade hard into its featureless face. It screeched as it died, but for every shadow destroyed, more always took their place. Back to back, roared Garen, and the pauldrons of the 5 warriors clashed together. They fought shoulder to shoulder in a circle of steel, a beacon of light against the darkness. Show them the strength of Demacia! Lux flowed hard through the forest, trees flashing past to either side in a blur. Light shone from the tip of her staff, illuminating her path with blazing radiance. It was reckless to gallop through the forest at such speed, even with her light as a guide. But the nightmares assailing Garen and the Dauntless Vanguard would keep coming. Human imaginations were a depthless well of nightmares. Fear of death, fear of infirmity, or fear of the loss of a loved one. She followed the route she had taken only this morning, letting the power of her magic flow into Starfire to grant him sight beyond measure. Lux and her mount flew through the night, eventually reaching the crossroads where the roads diverged. Ignoring the roads east and west, she led Starfire straight ahead to the path leading north, the path to Great-Grandfather Phocian's tomb. Even with her light and the mount's surefootedness, Lux was forced to slow down as the path wound its way up rocky glens. The closer she came to the tomb, the more the landscape began to change, like something from a tale told to frighten small children. The trees wept a thick black sap. Their branches gnarled and twisted into clawed hands that plucked at her hair and cloak. Gaps in the boles of trees resembled fanged mouths, and venomous spiders spun clawing webs in their high branches. The ground underfoot became spongy and damp with blackish pools of stagnant water, like a grove abandoned by one of the Fae folk. Starfire stopped before the entrance to the shadow-withered clearing and threw his head back, nostrils flaring in fear. "Easy, boy," she said.
Easy,
Only a
boy.
few more steps. But the horse would not be forced into another inch forward. "Fine," said Lux. "I'll go myself." She slid off her horse's back and entered the clearing with her staff held high. Its light guttered like a lantern in a storm, but gave off just enough illumination for her to see. The mount of Phocian's tomb was a shallow hill of grass that looked black in the gloom. Its summit crowned a rough pile of stacked stone. Dark smoke drifted into a sky that whirled with images of ancient horrors awaiting their time to claim the world. Dark lines snaked across the great stone slab telling of Phocian's deeds. A young boy, no more than 12 or 13, sat cross-legged before it, his thin body swaying as if in trance. Tendrils of black smoke coiled from the tomb, wrapped around his neck like strangling vines.
Assuming that's Lusa or Luca, whatever.
"Lusa?" said Lux. The boy swaying ceased at the sound of her voice. He turned to face Lux, and she fluttered at the sight of his soulless black eyes. A cruel grin spread his face. "Not anymore," he said.
Uh-oh.
A looming spider with hook-bladed legs reared over Garen. He split its thorax and kicked the flailing creature from the platform even as his body disintegrated. Legs braced. Garen felt a searing cold in the muscles of his shoulder as a black claw plunged through his pauldron. The metal did not buckle or crack. The claw passed through unimpeded, and Garen felt a sickening revulsion spread through him. He smelled rank grave dirt, but he fought through the pain as he had always been trained to do. Rodian fell as a hooking blade slid under his guard and plunged into his side. He cried out in pain, his shield lowering. "Straighten up!" yelled Garen. "Shake the pain!" Rodian straightened, chest at his lips, as the shadow creatures barked one another in their frenzy to reach the Dauntless Vanguard.
You broke both your legs? Walk it off.
"They never stop coming," cried Varya. "Then we never stop fighting," answered Garen.
Spin to win.
To flee this haunted clearing, Lux walked toward the young boy, his eyes rippled with darkness, nightmares waiting to be born from the rich loam of human frailty. She felt a cold, calculating intelligence apprise her. Lusa nodded and smoothly rose to his feet.
How did she know that he would be in the grave, though? There was no real hint that that's where she needs to go. At least that I'd noticed. No.
Muttering shadows gathered at the edge of the clearing. Monsters and terrors lurked.
Maybe she felt it.
As they moved to surround her. "You have nightmares aplenty," he said. "I think I'll crack your skull open with a rock to scoop them out."
Oh, nice.
"This isn't you," she said. "Tell me, who do you think it is?" "The demon in that tomb," said Lux. I don't think it was as dead as people thought when they buried Fossian. Lusa grinned, his mouth spreading so wide the skin at the corners of his mouth tore. Rivulets of blood ran down his chin. Not dead at all, he said. Just sleeping, healing, renewing, preparing. Preparing for what? Said Lux, forcing herself to take another step forward. The boy tooted and shook a lecturing finger. Lux froze, unable to take another step. Now, he said, bending to pick up a sharpened stone. Let me cut out a nightmare first. Lusa, said Lux, unable to move but still able to speak. You have to fight it. I know you can. You have magic within you. I know you have. That's why you ran away, isn't it? That's why you came here, to be next to someone who defeated a demon. The thing wearing the flesh of the boy laughed, and the grass withered around it at the sound. His tears were like water in a desert, it said, coming forward and circling her as if seeing where best he might crack her skull open. They woke me.
Water is very valuable in desert, by the way, I'm just saying.
Nourished me. I had slept for so long I had forgotten how sweet suffering of mortals tasted. The boy reached out and stroked her cheek. His touch sent a cold spike of terror through Lux. He lifted his finger away and a smoky thread followed. She gagged as the fear of drowning filled her. A tear rolled down her cheek. I made him sleep. His dreams were ripe with horrors to be made real, said the boy. His power is light, a glowing ember compared to the furnace that burnt within your flesh. It gave me a little in the way of real substance. But childish fears are banquet after I had gone so long without. Demacia is a terror to his kind, to your kind. Lux made a magic retreat from this creature, the darkness filling the clearing, pressing her light down into little more than a spark. But even a single spark could ignite a flame that would devour entire forest. They hated him. Lusa knew that. You mortals are always so quick to fear the things you don't understand. So easy to fan those flames and draw forth the most exquisite visions of terror. Lux flexed her fingers, the motion painful. But pain meant she had control. She used it. She nursed the building spark within her, kept it apart from her terror, and let it seep slowly back into her body. Lusa, please, she said, forcing each word out. You have to fight it. Don't let it use you. The boy laughed. He can't hear you, and even if he could, you know he's right to fear what his own people would do if they discovered the truth. That he is the very thing they hate.
A mage.
You of all people should know how it feels.
Yep.
Pain spread along Lux's arm and moved through her chest. The boy's black eyes narrowed as she sensed the build-up of magic. I know all too well, she said, but I do not let fear define me. Lux thrust her staff toward
Kamehameha.
burned, and the blow was clumsy. The boy chopped back, too slow. The golden tip of the staff brushed the skin of his cheek. The moment of connection was fleeting, but it was enough.
Okay, back in town.
The vanguard fought with brutally efficient sword cuts and battering blows from their shields, but they could not fight forever. Eventually, the shadows would drag them down. A pack of squirming things with grasping arms attacked from the left, fouling Daedaro's swing with their bodies. The blow glanced off his shield and hammered into his shoulder guard. He grunted and punched his sword into the belly of a dark-fleshed beast with the head of a dragon. Step in, shouted Sabator. Keep them at bay. Garen threw a sword cut into the writhing darkness. A backstroke to the guts and a thrust to the chest. Movement to the right. A howling insect-like skull with fangs like daggers. He slashed it in the eyes. It screamed and burst apart in smoke and cinders. Two more came at him, no room to swing. Another pummel strike strove in the first chest, stabbed the other in the belly, blade out. The monsters withdrew. Garen stepped back, level with Varia and Rodian. Each was slathered from helm to graves in ash. We hold the line, said Garen. For how long? Asked Daedaro. Garen looked to the north, where a distant light shone in the forest. As long as Lux needs, said Garen with a warning.
Yeah.
And the shadows came at them again.
Endless.
Lux poured her light into Lusa, and blinding radiance exploded through the clearing.
Oh, yeah.
The monster within the young boy was torn loose from his flesh with a howling screech of fury and desperation. White fire enfolded her, becoming everything around them. The darkness fled before Lux's awesome power.
He sounds more like Kane than he does like fucking Nocturne, because like Kane's ult can go into the body of somebody.
Its shadow banished by the warmth of her light. The growing radiance kept growing until the forest and the tomb were nowhere to be seen. Only an endless expanse of pale nothingness. Sitting in front of her was a young boy with his knees drawn to his chest. He looked up, and his eyes were those of a small, frightened child. Can you help me? He said. I can, said Lux, walking over and sitting next to him. But you have to come back with me. He shook his head. I can't. I'm scared. The Nightmare Man is out there.
Nightmare Man.
But together we can beat him, she said. I'll help you. You will? If you let me, said Lux with a smile. I know what you're going through, how you're afraid of what will happen if people know what you can do. Trust me, I've been through it as well. But you don't have to be afraid. What's inside of you? It's not evil. It's not darkness. It's light. It's a light I can help you control. She held out her hand. You promise? He said. I promise, said Lux. You're not alone, Lusa. The boy gripped her hand like he dropped.
Yeah, there's a lot of you. So many of you that it's a wonder that Demacia lasted this long without having a revolt.
Man grasping a rope. The light swelled again. impossibly bright, and when it faded, Lux saw the clearing was just as she remembered it from 7 years ago. Green grass, a hillock with a stone pile, and a slab describing Fossian's deeds. The darkness that had so transformed the forest was now absent. The clawed trees were nothing more than just ordinary trees. The sky a midnight blue with a vault of twinkling stars. The sound of night-haunting birds echoed from the forest canopy. Lusa still held her hand and smiled up at her. Is he gone? The Nightmare Man?
Nightmare Man.
Feeling the bitter taste of dark power diminish. For now, at least. I think maybe it's not just in the tomb anymore, but it's gone from here. That's what's important right now. Can we go home now? Asked Lusa. Yes, said Lux. We can go home. Numbing cold
Meanwhile in town, Garen slayed all the villagers.
filled Garen. His limbs were leaden, pierced through by shadow claws. Ice running in his veins chilled him to the very heart of his soul, and his vision grayed. Sabator and Daedro were down, skin darkening.
Yeah.
Rodian was on his knees, a clawed hand at his throat. Varia fought on, her shield arm hanging useless at her side, but her sword arm still strong. Garen tasted ash and despair. He had never known defeat, not like this. Even when he once believed Jarvan was dead, he had found the will to continue. Now, his life was being sapped with every breath. A towering figure reared up before him, a horned demon with an axe of darkness. It looked like a savage warrior he had slain many years ago. Garen raised his sword, ready to die with the Demacian war cry on his lips. A summer wind blew. The brightness in the northern sky shone like a new risen sun. The shadow creature vanished, blown like scraps of charred leaves in a hurricane. The wind and the strange radiance spread across the town square like daybreak, and the shadows fled before it. Garen let out a breath, barely able to believe he still could. Rodian sucked in a lungful of air as Sabator and Daedro picked themselves up from the ground. They looked around, amazed as the last remaining shadows were banished and the townfall began to stir. What happened? Gasped Varia. Lux, said Garen. With Lusa reunited with his
Lux
great
happened.
and no instructions left with Mistress Bernile of the Lightbringers on his further education, Lux and Garen rode toward Phosborough's northern gates at the head of the Dauntless Vanguard. Their mood was subdued, and a palpable guilt hung over every person they passed on their way from the town. None of Phosborough's inhabitants could remember anything after the execution, but all of them knew they had played part in the man's death. May the veiled lady welcome you to her breast, said Lux as they passed Aldo Dian's burial procession. Do you really think he deserves such mercy? Said Garen. He killed innocents. That's true, agreed Lux. But do you understand why? Does it matter? He was guilty of a crime and paid the price. Of course it matters. Aldo Dian was their friend and neighbor, said Lux. They drank beer with him in the tavern, shared jokes with him on the street. Their sons and daughters played with his children. In their rush of judgment, any chance of understanding what caused his murderous acts was lost. Garen kept his gaze.
This is what happens when there's a spoiled girl who still grows up in a loving family and doesn't have Instagram or TikTok. If she had Instagram or TikTok, a man wouldn't even exist. Like, yeah, fucking kill him. I don't give a shit.
Fixed on the road ahead. They don't want understanding, he said at last. They don't need it. How can you say that? We live in a world that does not allow such nonsense, Lux. Demacia is beset on all sides by terrible foes. Savage tribes in the north, a rapacious empire in the east, and the power of dark mages who threaten the very fabric of our realm. We deal in absolutes by necessity. Allowing doubt to cloud our judgment leaves us vulnerable, and I cannot allow us to become vulnerable. Even as Even so, agreed Garen. It's why I do what I do.
And that's how you get a revolt.
Demacia?
Well,
For Demacia, said Garen.
for Demacia. For Demacia.
And that was the massive story called For Demacia. I really like how this story foreshadows possible future plots, and on top of that, how it expands the world once again. At this point, I am curious if this demon is connected to the black monsters around Targon's Peak, because if so, once again, our theory is strengthened. But that's it for today. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like and subscribe for more lore.
That was pretty cool. I mean, all the extra information was... Because I'm pretty sure it's Nocturne, right? Like, he also put, like, the Nocturne thing in the background for a bit. But, like, I'm pretty sure it was Nocturne. Who else is, like... He is the Nightmare Chaser, or whatever it's called. Yeah, I can't see it as anyone else but Nocturne. So I guess her great-grandfather fought Nocturne. They thought that he killed it, but apparently he didn't kill it and was just recovering. And then woke up with Luca. All that stuff. So they don't capture him here. Sure, I know they capture him later on. Again, this is assuming this is Nocturne. But man, this video did not need to be 50 minutes long. It could have been just like something like... Yeah, so Lux went to her great-grandfather's tomb. She sensed the disturbance in the force. Garen was there on patrol with his 4 buddies who were heroes who don't really matter. There was like some dark magic affecting people with nightmares. There was this one guy who killed a bunch of people, his neighbors. And then when Garen killed him, a shadow came out of him. Lux felt this the shadow traveling towards her great-grandfather's tomb. Meanwhile, the whole town engulfed in nightmarish creatures, so Garen and his four buddies and the musketeers started fighting them. Lux went there. She cleansed the evil spirit from the kid that was possessed, and the nightmares were gone. But again, this doesn't build the world of like what will happen later on. I get it, but it's like, I don't know how. So it's like, as a book, yes, or as like a novel, it's important to know these details, yes. But as someone who's just telling like the lore, I think just like focusing on the important lore bits is probably more important, because like, as much as it's interesting to know why there will be civil war in Demacia, I feel like it's more important to know that just that there is civil war in Demacia. And the main reason is because they didn't allow mages, and it was hypocritical of them to not allow mages. That's pretty much it. Alright. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. Leave a comment down below. Tell me I'm an idiot. Whatever. I just like the I don't want to get to the nitty-gritty. I just want the juice. I'm a fast eater, a fast drinker. I don't dwell on it. I just like, give it to me. Good. Anyways, let's go to the next one.